Good evening, my darlings. I am Lady Obsyren, and tonight I invite you to follow me through the forgotten halls of a building where time has come to a halt. Let us explore together one of the most disturbing mysteries that lurk in the silent depths of downtown Sao Paulo. Stay alert and listen carefully, for what is about to emerge from the dark does not forget those who hear it. There are tales that should never see the light of day. Stories whispered within the walls of forgotten places, buried beneath cement, denied by official records. Yet they persist. They live like open wounds in the fabric of reality. This is not merely one of them. It is a calling, a warning, and perhaps a foretelling. You are about to hear the story of Apartment 333, a tale that reached me through twisted paths via an old paranormal forum that vanished from the internet as though it had never existed. The user who posted it disappeared. Their name? Witness 333. Since then, every night, I wake at 3:33 in the morning, and I hear whispers. I am not here to prove anything, only to share what perhaps should have remained buried. Listen carefully, but please, do not respond if your name is called. There are places in the world where the boundary between our realm of existence and the other side is thinner than it should be. Places where the fabric of reality has been torn by traumatic events, collective pain, or forgotten rituals. The ancients knew this and built their temples and cemeteries far from homes. The moderns, in their scientific arrogance, ignore these ancient understandings, erecting condominiums over cemeteries, shopping malls over hospitals, apartments over torture sites. This story reached me through an old paranormal forum that was mysteriously shut down 3 years ago. The user who shared this account, who identified only as Witness 333, disappeared from the internet 1 week after posting it. All of their social media profiles were deleted. Their email returns as non-existent, and attempts to trace their IP lead to impossible addresses. I am not here to convince you of the truth of this story. I am simply here to share what I found before it too is erased. In the months I have spent researching this case, I have discovered disturbing patterns of systematic removal of information. Pages from old news articles disappear from digital archives. Historical records are altered. People investigating the subject are silenced in subtle ways. What you are about to read is the full transcription of the original account, complemented by my own discoveries. Some names have been changed, not to protect the innocent, but because the real names seem to attract unwanted attention. one final warning. After I began compiling this story, I have been waking every night precisely at 3:33 a.m. Initially, I attributed it to anxiety or some sleep disorder until I started hearing the whispers. Daniel Mendez had always been a practical man. At 34, a freelance video editor, he was immersed in deadlines and projects, rarely giving attention to superstitions or supernatural stories. His skepticism was almost a trademark among his friends, who often joked about his inability to appreciate horror films. Too predictable, he always said. When he came across the ad for the apartment on Rua Aurora in downtown Sao Paulo, Daniel saw only the practical advantages: an astonishingly affordable rent for the location, spaciousness, and proximity to his main clients. The Maristella building, constructed in the 1940s, maintained a decadent elegance typical of buildings in that area. The Art Deco facade, with its geometric lines and discrete ornaments, contrasted with the modernized interior of the apartments. "It's a unique opportunity," explained Sergio Buarque, the real estate agent, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes and a smile that never reached them. The previous owner had to move out in a hurry due to family issues. He even left some furniture behind. Daniel signed the contract the same day. The rent, almost half the market price for that area, was too tempting to pass up. When Daniel questioned Sergio about the unusually low price, the real estate agent vaguely mentioned the current state of the downtown area and the age of the building. Explanations that seemed reasonable at the time. The move took place on a cloudy Sunday in March. Apartment 333 was on the third floor, obviously at the end of the hall. It had 3 rooms converted into 2, creating a spacious living area. The renovation had been well executed, but Daniel noticed some strange details. One area of the living room wall had a slightly different texture, as if something had been covered and repainted. The corridor connecting the living room to the bedrooms was disproportionately long for the size of the apartment, and there was a door at the end of the hallway. "The closet is locked," the agent explained, "and unfortunately, we don't have the key. The previous owner said it was just an old storage area, useless. If you'd like to open it later, you can call a locksmith." In the first few nights, Daniel slept surprisingly well. The silence of the apartment was a welcome relief after years of living near a busy avenue. Occasionally, he would hear the characteristic creak of old buildings, wood expanding and contracting, old plumbing at work, but nothing that disturbed his sleep. It was on the third night that everything began. Daniel woke up suddenly, for no apparent reason. It wasn't a nightmare, nor an external noise. He simply opened his eyes, fully alert, as if something had called him. The digital clock on the bedside table read 3:33 a.m. It was then that he heard it for the first time. A distant whisper, almost inaudible, coming from the hallway. "Daniel, come see." The voice was androgynous, neither clearly male nor female, with an ethereal quality that seemed to float in the air. Daniel sat up in bed, his heart racing, ears straining. But the sound didn't repeat. "I'm just working too much," he murmured to himself, lying back down. Stress and a fertile imagination. The next morning, the memory of the whisper seemed like a distant dream, easily dismissed in the light of day. Daniel immersed himself in his work, editing a documentary on urban architecture, and completely forgot about the incident until the following night. Again, he woke at 3:33 for no apparent reason, and again, the whisper, a little clearer this time. "Daniel, we are waiting for you," turned on the bedside lamp and remained still, listening intently. The apartment was in complete silence, not even the usual nighttime creaks of the old structure. A silence so absolute it seemed to have substance, as if the air had grown denser. Daniel got up, determined to investigate. With his phone as an improvised flashlight, he walked to the bedroom door and looked down the hallway. It was empty as expected, but something seemed different. The hallway, which had already been strangely long for the apartment, seemed to stretch even further into the darkness. The closet door at the end seemed farther away than he remembered. "Optical illusion," he murmured, trying to rationalize. Darkness and sleep confuse the perception of distance. He returned to bed, leaving the bedside lamp on for the rest of the night. On the fifth night, the pattern repeated. Waking at 3:33, the whisper in the hallway. But this time, Daniel was prepared. He had installed an audio recording app on his phone, leaving it running through the night. The next morning, eager, he checked the recording. At 3:33, the audio showed only silence for a few seconds. Then, almost imperceptible, a sound that could be interpreted as a distant voice, turning the volume all the way up and using headphones, Daniel managed to distinguish words. "Daniel, the door. We need you to open it." A shiver ran down his spine. The recording had captured something real. It wasn't just his imagination. Still, Daniel's rational mind searched for logical explanations. Radio interference, conversations from neighbors picked up through the thin walls, maybe even an audio leak from his own editing projects. That night, the 6th since his move, Daniel decided not to sleep. He armed himself with strong coffee, turned on the television at a low volume, and settled on the living room sofa, determined to stay awake through the night. Around 2 a.m., his eyes began to grow heavy. He fought against sleep, but eventually succumbed, dozing off while sitting. He woke with a start. The television was displaying only static. The digital clock blinked. 3:33. And then, clearer than ever, the whisper came. Not from the hallway this time, but from behind him, as if someone were speaking directly in his ear. "Daniel, your time is running out. Open the door. Free us." He jumped off the sofa, spinning around, frantically searching for the source of the voice. The apartment was empty. The television suddenly returned to its regular programming, as if it had never shown static. Daniel spent the rest of the night wide awake, lights on, repeatedly checking every room. By morning, exhausted and shaken, he decided he needed answers. On the 7th day, Daniel decided to confront the mystery directly. First, he tried to contact Sergio, the real estate agent, but found that the number he had was no longer in service. He called the real estate agency, only to be told that there had been no Sergio Buarque in their staff for the last 5 years. "There must be some mistake," Daniel insisted. "He showed me the apartment just a week ago. I even have his card." "Mr. Mendes," replied the receptionist in a cautious voice, "our records show that your contract was signed directly with the owner, Mr. Augusto Villela. There was no broker involved." Daniel hung up, confused. The card from Sergio, which he had kept in his wallet, now showed only a blank rectangle, as if the ink had completely disappeared. His next stop was the building's administration. The building manager, Mr. Mateus, a man in his 70s who had lived in the building since the 1980s, greeted Daniel with visible discomfort when Daniel mentioned apartment 333. "That apartment," murmured the manager, nervously looking around as if afraid to be overheard. "Are you sure you want to know?" In the small, stuffy administration office, Mr. Mateus closed the door and windows before speaking. From a file, he pulled out a yellowed folder filled with clippings from old newspapers. The Maristella building was constructed in 1943, he began, but few know that it was built upon the ruins of another structure. Before that, this land housed the Santa Clara Psychiatric Institute, an institution that operated from 1897 until 1942, when it was destroyed by a fire. Daniel felt a knot form in his stomach. A fire? Yes. It started in the special treatment wing in the basement, exactly at 3:33 a.m. on March 13, 1942. 33 patients died, most of them locked in their cells. The manager slid a yellowed newspaper clipping across the table. The headline read, "Tragedy at the Santa Clara Institute. Fire kills dozens of patients." The photo showed the charred remains of what had once been an imposing Victorian building. When they built the Maristella, they completely sealed off access to the basement of the old institute. But your apartment, the manager hesitated. Your apartment is directly above what used to be the treatment room. And that closet at the end of the hallway, it's not a closet. It's a passage that was sealed off during construction. Daniel felt his mouth go dry. A passage to where? To the basement, to what remains of the institute. The manager lowered his voice. There have been incidents over the years. Apartment 333 rarely stays occupied for more than a few months. People report things, voices, objects moving, appearances. Why didn't anyone warn me? Daniel asked, feeling a mix of fear and anger. We try. We always try. But there's something strange about how people end up renting that place. The contracts show up signed. The brokers involved are never the same. And when we investigate, we find that these people don't even exist. The manager looked directly into Daniel's eyes. Like this Sergio Buarque, Daniel returned to the apartment with his mind in turmoil. On the way, he stopped at a hardware store and bought a crowbar. If there was a sealed passage in his apartment, he needed to know what was on the other side. As he entered the apartment, he immediately noticed that something was different. The air was colder, with a vague smell of mildew and something chemical that resembled hospital antiseptics. The lights seemed dimmer, casting long shadows in the corners, and the hallway was definitely longer than he remembered. Daniel walked slowly toward the door of the supposed closet. For the first time, he noticed details that had escaped his attention. The wood was different from the other doors in the apartment, older and darkened with time. The doorknob was not chrome like the others, but oxidized brass, and almost imperceptible, there were small symbols carved into the doorframe, concentric circles with marks that resembled ancient runes. Taking a deep breath, Daniel positioned the crowbar in the door's crack. With a firm motion, he forced the wood. The old lock gave way with a loud snap, and the door opened a few centimeters, releasing a burst of cold, stagnant air. The smell that emanated from the opening made Daniel instinctively step back, a mixture of decomposition, chemicals, and something indefinable, primordial, that triggered instinctual alarms in the human brain. It was the smell of something that should not be disturbed. Using his phone's flashlight, Daniel pushed the door all the way open. Instead of the small closet the realtor had mentioned, there was a narrow, concrete staircase spiraling down into the darkness. The walls were made of old stone, stained with moisture, and covered in darkened moss that seemed to pulse faintly under the light. And on the walls, partially visible in the dim light, were scratch marks, as if dozens of hands had desperately tried to climb up that passage. Daniel took a step back, reason finally overcoming curiosity. This was madness. He should have called the police, or at least the building manager, before exploring further. It was then that he heard it. Not a whisper this time, but a chorus of muffled voices coming from below, repeating in unison. Daniel, finally, come meet the doctor. He slammed the door hard, his heart pounding in his chest. He tried to push a cabinet to block the entrance, but found he couldn't move it, as if it had suddenly become too heavy or was fixed to the floor. That night, Daniel didn't try to sleep. Sitting in the living room with all the lights on, he called friends, but no one answered. He sent detailed emails outlining his situation, attaching photos of the discovered passage and the newspaper clippings the building manager had shown him. He posted on paranormal forums, seeking advice or similar experiences. At 3:33 a.m., his internet connection dropped. The lights flickered 3 times and then went out, plunging the apartment into darkness. In the absolute silence that followed, Daniel heard the unmistakable sound of the closet door slowly opening, and then wet footsteps climbing the stairs. The next morning, after a night of indescribable terror, Daniel preferred not to recall in detail. He made a decision. He would document everything. If something happened to him, at least there would be evidence. Using his professional video editing equipment, he installed cameras at strategic points in the apartment. One in the living room, another in the bedroom, and the main one, a night vision camera with a motion sensor, aimed directly at the hallway and the door to the passage. During the day, Daniel obsessively researched the Santa Clara Institute. At the municipal library, he found more newspaper clippings and a rare book on the history of psychiatry in Brazil that dedicated a chapter to the institution. The institute had been founded by Dr. Augusto Vilela, the same name as the current owner of the apartment, Daniel noted with a shiver. A doctor who had studied in Europe and returned to Brazil with controversial theories on the treatment of mental illnesses. The book vaguely mentioned experimental procedures and unconventional therapies, but without going into specific details. One paragraph in particular caught his attention. The patients in the special wing located in the basement rarely returned to the upper floors. Those who did demonstrated profound behavioral changes, extreme docility alternating with episodes of ritualistic self-harm. Many lost the ability to speak, communicating only through whispers, even when their vocal cords remained intact. Some developed a fixation with specific times, particularly with the number 3, waking precisely at the same minute every night. The last pages of the chapter discussed the fire that destroyed the institute. The official version attributed the cause to a short circuit, but there were rumors that it had been deliberately started by staff, horrified by what they had witnessed in the basement. Dr. Vilela's body was never found among the rubble. Daniel returned to the apartment in the evening, carrying books, documents, and supplies. He had decided to stay one more night to capture concrete evidence before permanently leaving the place. At 10 p.m., he checked all the cameras and started the recordings. He locked himself in the bedroom with his laptop, monitoring the footage in real time. The hours passed slowly. Midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., nothing unusual in the recordings. At 3:30, Daniel felt the air change. The temperature dropped drastically, his breath forming small, visible clouds. On the monitor, the image of the hallway remained normal, but something seemed off. The proportions seemed slightly distorted, as if the hallway was stretching subtly. 3:32. The hallway camera began showing interference, horizontal lines cutting through the image. 3:33. All the cameras shut down simultaneously for exactly 33 seconds. When they resumed, the passage door was wide open, and in the hallway, barely visible in the shadows, a figure moved toward the bedroom. It didn't walk normally. It seemed to drag itself, leaving a wet trail on the floor. The image was too grainy to make out details, but Daniel could see that the figure wore what appeared to be a dark-stained medical coat, and its head, Its head didn't move as it should, swaying at impossible angles. Daniel bolted the bedroom door, pushing a dresser against it as precaution. On the monitor, the figure stopped in front of the door. Slowly, it lifted what should have been its face toward the camera, as if it knew exactly where Daniel was watching from. The image froze at that moment, all the cameras shutting down again. And then, the whisper, not coming from the hallway or the monitor, but from within the room itself, as if someone were speaking directly in his ear. "Daniel, the doctor will see you now." A cold, wet hand touched his shoulder from behind. What happened in the following hours was only partially recorded by the cameras when they came back online. Fragments of footage showed Daniel running through the apartment, the figure in the coat always in the shadows, never fully visible. At one point, Daniel appeared to be dragged toward the open passage, struggling desperately. The last clear sequence showed Daniel standing in the hallway, staring fixedly at the camera. His face was pale, eyes glazed over. Slowly, he turned and walked willingly toward the open passage, descending the stairs until he disappeared into the darkness. The door closed behind him. 3 days after the recorded events, Marcos Ribeiro, a close friend of Daniel, received an email containing only a link to a video file and the message, "Watch, share, they are coming back." The video was an edited compilation of the footage from that night, along with clips from Daniel's research on the Santa Clara Institute. The editing was flawless, clearly the work of a professional. That is, Daniel himself. Worried, Marcos tried to contact his friend. All calls went straight to voicemail. Messages went unanswered. After 24 hours without a response, Marcos decided to go to the apartment in person. The building manager, Mr. Mateus, accompanied him to 333. They knocked on the door with no response. Using the spare key, they entered the apartment. It was completely empty. Not only had Daniel disappeared, all of his belongings, furniture, equipment, everything had vanished. The apartment looked freshly painted, with no sign of recent occupancy. "This is impossible," murmured Marcos. "I was here 2 weeks ago. The apartment was full of things." The manager seemed strangely resigned. "It always happens this way," he said quietly. "They disappear, and it's as if they were never here." Marcos walked through the empty apartment, reaching the hallway that led to the bedrooms. At the end, where the passage door he had seen in the video should have been, there was only a smooth wall, freshly painted. "Where's the door?" he asked, his voice trailing into the silence. Confused. "In the video, there was a door here." The manager furrowed his brow. "What door?" "There was never a door in this hallway." Marcos insisted on calling the police. When the officers arrived, they patiently listened to his account of his missing friend and the disturbing video. They asked to see the video, but when Marcos checked his email, the message had vanished. The link to the file returned a 404 error. The police investigation was brief and inconclusive. There were no official records that Daniel Mendez had ever rented apartment 333. The contract that Marcos swore he had seen was not in the real estate agency's files. Daniel's social media accounts still existed, but his last update showed him planning a trip abroad 2 weeks prior. Your friend probably decided to travel and forgot to tell you, concluded the detective in charge. This happens all the time. But Marcos knew something was deeply wrong. In the following days, he tried to share the video with others, only to discover that the file had disappeared from his computer. His posts on forums about the case were systematically removed for violating community guidelines. Mutual friends seemed to have confused memories of Daniel, as if their recollections were being gradually erased. 1 week after the disappearance, Marcos received a call from an unknown number. When he answered, he only heard static for a few seconds, followed by a familiar whisper. Daniel's voice, distant and altered. "Marcos, don't search anymore. The doctor doesn't like unscheduled visits. He's coming back." The call dropped. When Marcos tried to return the call, an automated message informed him that the number did not exist. That same night, Marcos woke up suddenly for no apparent reason. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:33, and in the hallway of his own apartment, he heard a whisper calling his name. 2 weeks later, Marcos's apartment was found empty. His belongings had vanished. The walls freshly painted. There were no signs of a struggle or forced entry. His social media profiles showed a final update mentioning travel plans abroad. The case was filed as just another unexplained disappearance in the big city. Meanwhile, in the Maristella building, apartment 333 received a new tenant. The real estate agent, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes, who introduced himself as Sergio, explained to the young couple that the rent was surprisingly affordable for the location. "It's a unique opportunity," he said with a smile that never reached his eyes. The previous owner had to move out in a hurry, and at the end of the hallway, where there had once only been a smooth wall, an old wooden door quietly awaited, locked for now, until the clock struck 3:33. How did I get these records? It doesn't matter. What matters is that I am the one who found and compiled this story. Daniel's records, the partially corrupted footage, the historical documents about the Santa Clara Institute that continue disappearing from public archives. In the months since I started this investigation, I've discovered disturbing patterns. The Maristella building is not the only one built on the ruins of institutions where atrocities occurred. There are dozens of them scattered across the city, all with similar reports of disappearances, voices, and doors that should not exist. And in all of them, one name repeats in old documents: Dr. Augusto Villela. His photograph, which I found in a nearly destroyed file at the municipal library, shows a stern, middle-aged man with piercing eyes and a severe expression. The same photograph appears in records from 1897, 1923, 1942, 1968, and, even more disturbingly, in a real estate incorporation document from 2017. The same man, across more than a century, without aging a single day. As I write these lines, I know I am being watched. My computer turns on by itself in the middle of the night. Files disappear, and every night, precisely at 3:33, I wake up with the feeling that someone is standing at the foot of my bed. Yesterday, I received an email from an impossible address: A. Villela at institutosantaclara.org. The message contained only one line: "Your appointment is scheduled for tomorrow, 3:33. The doctor will see you personally." Below, there was an attachment: the original floor plan of the Santa Clara Institute, showing that the basement extended far beyond the land of the current Maristella building, forming a network of tunnels and rooms that passed directly beneath my own apartment. This morning, I noticed something that wasn't there before: an old door at the end of the hallway, where there had once only been a wall. I am sharing this story as a warning. If you are reading this, it may already be too late. The story finds those who need to hear it, those chosen by the doctor for their next appointment. If you wake up at 3:33 a.m. and hear a voice calling your name, do not respond. Do not open your eyes. And above all, do not open any door that should not be there. They are coming back, and the doctor is eager to resume his treatments. The original post ends here. The user Witness 333 never logged in again after sharing this story. Your account was deleted automatically due to inactivity 3 months later. All links to this narrative return a 4go4 error. You are the only one who can still see it. And it is 3:32 a.m. The story ends, but the whispers continue. The next chosen one might be listening now. It could be you. The doctor is still there, in the depths of the forgotten hallways, waiting for his next appointment. And if one day, in the dead of night, you wake at 3:33 and hear a voice calling you from the end of the hallway, do not open your eyes. Do not respond. And above all, do not open any door that should not be there, because he is coming back.